Hello and welcome to a special midweek Total Saints podcast. We are the weekly Saints podcast, your home for all things Southampton Football Club. This podcast is being live streamed on YouTube, Facebook, X and on Twitch, so good evening if you're watching along live. Our podcast is supported by our loyal Patreon community. Without you, we couldn't make this show each week. So thank you, as always, for your support. Coming up this week on the podcast, well, the run had to end eventually. I'm just not sure many of us thought it would be at Bristol City on a Tuesday night. We're going to dissect a defeat for the first time in literally months. And it's another game in front of the TV cameras on Friday with a trip to West Brom. Chris Hall from the Albion Analysis podcast is going to join us later to help preview that one. And today's I wasn't expecting that was the news that Jason Wilcox is a target for Manchester United. So we'll bring you what we know on that later too. My name's Martin Starke, and joining me this evening is Steve Grant, who is the owner of SaintsWeb, and Glen Cour is the writer of the blog League One -10. Underpinned by our TSP patrons, this is episode 264 of the Total Saints podcast. Now, first up is the shout to our Patreon community, whose monthly contributions support the show. There are two new Patreons this week. That's Duncan Pike and Stephen Morrow, who've joined our Bobby Stokes tier. So welcome, Duncan and Stephen, and thank you for your support. We have 4 tiers ranging from £5 to £20 per month. And aside from supporting the podcast, each of the tiers has some different perks. You get access to an ad-free version of the pod. There's the TSP t-shirt, some merch bundles, there's the FPL, and you get access to our TSP events and much, much more too. The ad-free version of the podcast is available on Spotify now. So if you link your Spotify and Patreon accounts, you can listen to the ad-free pod directly on the Spotify app. And if you were listening or watching last weekend, you will know that we launched the new look TSP shop. Patreons get a personal discount code to spend. There's hoodies, t-shirts and mugs, plus much, much more to come over the coming weeks. Do take a look. It's shop.totalsaints.co.uk. And if you'd like to get involved in supporting TSP each month, just head over to patreon.com/Total Saints podcast for more details. All the links are in the podcast show notes, and you'll find them in the YouTube description as well. So let's get into the football, shall we? Saints lost for the first time since September on Tuesday night, 3-1 the final score. Bristol City scoring 3 second-half goals to end our 25-game unbeaten run in all competitions. I must point out that this podcast was planned before then. It's not a reaction to that. It's not a meltdown special. This is just a generic run-of-the-mill extra pod to help with all the demands. Glenn, I guess we have to start with Bristol City. To be fair, they thoroughly deserve that win.
Yeah, they did. And it was very much a performance like they put on at St Mary's, only they scored the first goal this time. They restricted us. They kept the spaces very sort of like short in defence and stopped us from playing through them. And then they clearly had a plan to hit us on the break behind the fullbacks. Get down the sides and get crosses into the middle. It was only because they couldn't sort of like connect all the dots in the first half. A number of crosses came in, and sometimes it found players, but they missed and all that sort of stuff. And they played very well. Unlike at St Mary's, they found the finish in the second half, though. And they probably will admit they had a little bit of fortune on both the first 2 goals, because the first goal, he tries to play a 1-2 and it bounces off a small bone. If he'd played the 1-2 and it had come off his own player like he intended, he would have been offside. But yeah, they scored from that, and the second goal, it wasn't a corner. It came back off Howard Bellis, hit the guy, went off. But having conceded the corner, obviously you've got to defend it better than we did, which was just standing there and watching the biggest guy in the park head it into the net. So. But, as Russell Martin said afterwards, we had chances before they scored. I mean, he mentioned 2, which was the sort of Edozie half chance that he floated onto the bar, and the one that Adam Armstrong hit straight at the keeper. But I thought the worst miss was the one right at the start of the second half, when we nicked the ball sort of like high up the park. Armstrong slightly overhit the pass. Edozie didn't control it properly, and then the cross, and then Brooks tried to take out the goalpost. That was the worst miss, because basically we made a mess of it. and that should have been 1-0. And then it's a different game. They showed at St Mary's Bristol City don't really have a plan B other than sit deep and play on the breaks. So, but fair play to Bristol. Can't complain. The third goal was a really good goal. And yeah, they deserve to win. And we've, as you said at the start, we had to lose some time. I just felt like it almost seemed like one game too many for a lot of players. It just seemed like a number kind of hit the wall, didn't play particularly well, didn't have the energy. If you compare it to our away game at Swansea, when we had, midfielders pelting forward, getting ahead of the ball, and everyone seemed to be, really in sync and playing well. There was none of that in this game. It just seemed very, very sluggish, and from the start. But but with the cards falling another way, we could have won it. We just didn't come out on the right side this time.
Yeah, tight margins. Steve, Russell Martin said afterwards it wasn't far from a really good performance. Is that fair? Is it all about that first goal and not getting that, and then they get their tails up?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think. I mean, certainly, if you judged that result and performance based on the views of a number of people a number of people that were in the ground, sort of around me, you'd have thought that that we'd have played a team 3 divisions below and lost 5-0. It was the ludicrous,
was it a strange atmosphere,
ludicrous overreaction from some quarters. It's been very, very strange. But I guess we're in that situation now where everyone's seen how good we can be, and that we've been able to put it together for a consistent, very, very long, consistent period. And yeah, last night on Tuesday night, it just didn't quite fit together. We were all, it kind of felt like we were always about half a yard away from doing absolutely the right thing every time. First half, I mean, there was a lot of kind of dissent around Shea Charles's passing, which was, his radar was off a little bit, but actually I thought that his positioning was excellent in that midfield, to the extent that actually the reason why they were having to go Bristol City were having to go so wide was because Charles actually had control of that midfield from a defensive shield position perspective. So in that regard, we didn't actually miss Flynn Downs. Where we missed him was the being able to play that forward pass through the lines. And a number of times Charles misplaced a pass either straight to an opposition player or straight out of play. Kind of sort of ended quite a lot of our attacks before they'd even got started. So that was the only frustrating thing for me. I was really surprised though that we made the change at half time, because I thought that actually the positional, as I say, the positional side of things, it was working the way it was, and I'm not sure we really needed necessarily to change personnel immediately. It wasn't that much of a disaster. We were in the game, and arguably we actually created the better chances in that first half. Yeah. Albeit only sort of 2 or 3 of them. But yeah, second half we obviously started really well, took advantage of a defensive mistake, and I think ultimately that was the catalyst of our downfall. Because while Brooks was excellent in the first half, he was running at players and he was getting into spaces and causing them a lot of problems without actually creating any actual chances. Once he'd basically almost rearranged himself around that goalpost, you could just tell he wasn't sort of able to move as freely. So the substitution, I mean, to be honest, probably came about 10 minutes later than I expected it to, given how he was moving sort of immediately after the incident. But yeah, second half we created a couple of chances, didn't we? With obviously the Walker Peters volley straight after they took the lead. I think if that goes in, then all of a sudden the mood changes, and we're then the ones with the momentum again all of a sudden. But keeper makes a decent save, and we didn't really threaten a huge amount after that. It was all a little bit disjointed. The substitutions changed the shape of the side, and the guys that came on didn't didn't do a massive amount. Fraser was okay in patches. Mara had a couple of nice touches, and Sulemana kind of ran in sort of positive straight direction, but didn't then tended to kind of run into one of three players that were surrounding him. So it was just frustrating. I think once City got the lead, they were able to play in a more comfortable sort of holding pattern style and just pick us off on the break, because they know that the fullbacks are going to go forward. So there's always going to be space in behind. But yeah, I mean, it's one loss in 26. It's not a time for sort of heavy recriminations or sort of finger pointing and saying, "Oh, teams have worked us out."
Knee-jerk reaction.
Yeah, I mean, the only concern is ultimately we've conceded 6 goals in 2 games against at best mid-table opposition. That's a concern. But I think we kind of all suspect that that's a personnel thing.
I was going to say that
it'll be resolved as soon as Flynn Downs is back in the team.
You hope so. I mean, I think we need to talk about that, Glenn. I think you were the one that perhaps highlighted that with Will Smallbone playing as that number 6 or the defensive midfielder, whatever they like to call it, that's 6 goals conceded with him playing in front of the back 4. And although you would look immediately at the defense, wouldn't you?
Yeah,
but it's not just solely on him.
No, it's not solely on him, but he is. I struggle to think of a least suitable player to play that position. But it's not just. I mean, he doesn't want to play there. Russell Martin seems to have a bit of a blind spot and thinks that he can play there. If you look at the last 2 games, how many goals do we let in when Flynn Downs is on the pitch? None. How many do we let in with Shay Charles on the pitch? None. How many do we let in with a midfield 3 of Smallbone, Rothwell, and Stuart Armstrong? 6. It's quite glaring. You could argue that we've also scored a lot of goals. But as I said after the Huddersfield game, 3 goals a game, you're not going to win many. Rothwell meant we got away with it against Huddersfield because he scored 2 worldies, basically. That's not going to happen every week. And playing those 3 in midfield, you're basically playing a number 8 and 2 number 10s. And there's just not enough defensive nous there. I was delighted when Charles was picked because I was worried they were going to start with those 3 in midfield from the start, and I was horrified when he got taken off because I thought exactly the same as Steve. At the end of the day, we're still 0-0. Yes, some of his passing was very wayward, but the thing is that's like Russell Martin's worst thing, isn't it? He wants players who can keep the ball above all else. So he decided to take him off, and I think it was a bad decision. I really do, because you then haven't got a midfielder whose sole brief is to keep the back door shut, and we're just too open. We play, we push the fullbacks high. If we give the ball away in the middle of the park, the fullbacks are gone. I mean, I'd take the mick out of Ryan Manning all the time because his defending is a bit suspect, but it's not his fault if we give the ball away behind him, which is what we were tending to do yesterday. And Flynn Downs stops so many counterattacks, usually by his pace and his determination to get into the tackle. And Will Smallbone's not that sort of player. I mean, I sort of like have a joke about if Will Smallbone was coming back to his house and he turned the corner and it was on fire, he couldn't sprint to the house. It's just a leisurely jog up to the front door.
So what is the option then? So if Flynn Downs is missing and like he is, if he's been out, what is the option with that number 6?
Shay Charles is the backup. I mean, he's the only alternative we've got, really, to play that position. Jack Stephens, we've tried in midfield before and it didn't work, and I am surprised that it hasn't been tried yet, and I wouldn't be surprised in the slightest if that is wheeled out on Friday if Flynn Downs is not fit, because it would be difficult to unless he's prepared to give Shay Charles another chance based on the fact that it was his first game for a while. He played the FA Cup, didn't he? It was his first game in midfield for quite a while. Maybe he'll give him another chance. maybe Jack Stevens in that central midfield role. But out of those three midfield, I mean, I actually think Stuart Armstrong would probably be more suitable for that position than Will Smallbone. But it's like putting a striker in.
Quicker, or
Yeah, it's like
Just
putting
more
a strike.
energy, isn't it?
It's like putting a striker in goal, though. You know, he might do the odd thing, but ultimately he's going to get found out, and we cannot play those three in midfield and play them like we have, because unless Rothwell's going to score 2 worldies a game, then it's just we're going to be chasing too many deficits, and it's just not going to work.
I thought Rothwell was decent again, actually, for an hour.
Did you think so? I didn't really notice him.
He was the one guy that I mean, obviously where the away end's right behind the goal, and I was quite high up, so you get quite a good sort of tactical view of how everything's being laid out. And you could see that he was the guy that was finding the space between the lines, and all the passes out of the centre backs were going to him. And he was the one that had the confidence and knowing that he had the time around him to turn and then drive forwards. He was the one that was doing that, and he got into some good positions. But final ball let us down a little bit. I mean, the pitch wasn't great.
They kept watering it, didn't they? As well, it looked like everyone kept falling over. It was.
It'd been hammering it down it'd been hammering it down all day. It was absolutely soaking, and you had that fairly ludicrous little passage of play in the first half where Edozie put the fullback on his backside, and then proceeded to fall over himself when he was about to put the cross in. And it was like, well, what can you do when the conditions are what they are? But yeah, I mean, frustrating, but it is what it is.
Did you see the fullbacks getting switched over as well, Steve? We were trying to watching at home, trying to work out what was going on there. They swapped over for a bit. I think that was
I think that was from a set piece where we had a corner and Manning had gone, and it was on the right, and Manning had taken the corner, and as a result, Walker Peters was covering the other side, which then meant that Manning was effectively playing right back for a period, basically just until the ball went out.
Right. I heard a school of thought this week, Glenn, that actually the now that the unbeaten run is over, we've been sidetracked by that a little bit, and maybe it takes the pressure off now. Do you think there's some sense in that, or is that complete nonsense?
I would hedge more towards the nonsense side of things. It's the sort of thing that club media want to talk about, and it's a fun thing for the fans, making up the chant and adding one to it every week.
I'm going to miss the chant.
Well, we're still undefeated, but that I think players and managers are professional enough to just one game at a time. And I do largely believe that to be true. So I think it's more of a thing for media and fans than it is for actual players. But as Russell Martin has said, it's now about how we respond. I mean, he said we responded well last time, but we lost another 3 games before we responded well.
Oh God!
So we don't want to do that. We don't want to do that this time. Thank you, Russell. We want to respond well straight away, which is going to be difficult because very difficult opposition coming up, and obviously only 3 days break. West Brom played on Tuesday as well, though, so it's. They had, by all accounts, a relatively comfortable game against Cardiff, but it is going to be a tough one against one of the stronger teams, and similar to Bristol City. Actually, they gave us a very good game at St Mary's, and were unlucky to lose, to be honest, because we sort of nicked it when I thought the game was going to be sort of meandering to a 1-1 draw, but there you go. So it is going to be tough, but now the unbeaten run's over, we can try and come up with a new song. And please don't sing one undefeated if we get a 0-0 draw on Friday. But
it was just infuriating, Steve, looking at the other results coming in, and obviously Ipswich played last night. I think Leicester won 2-0, didn't they? Swansea or Leeds beat Swansea 4-0, and then Ipswich scoring 4 goals last night. It just seems that we slip up and everybody else has got their foot on the gas at the moment.
But there's been enough weeks since the turn of the year where it's been the other way round, where we've been the only ones that have won and the others have all slipped up.
Yeah.
What was actually really noticeable from the other games involving the top sides this week was that they all got those games done very early. Leeds were 3 up inside 25 minutes, half an hour. Leicester had scored twice in 25. Who were the other ones? Ipswich were 3 up at half time as well at Millwall. So they were kind of able to coast through the second half of games, which is kind of what we've lacked for the most part away from home this season, other than that Swansea game, where we all thought, right, this is where we've worked out how to do it away from home, where we can now kind of effectively coast through half of the game and retain the energy. So yeah, I mean that's what we got to look for the next time we play somebody rubbish away from home. But it's, I mean, gonna be waiting a few weeks, I think.
Yeah, big game. We're going to preview the West Brom game in just a moment. We always finish with a player of the week. I think, Glenn, you said, was it half-time or full-time? No one really deserves more than a 6 out of 10. Is there anybody that might have edged towards a 6.5?
I thought our best 2 players were Sam Edozie and Kyle Walker-Peters. Some of Kyle's positioning defensively was a bit suspect. I thought Sam Edozie was our brightest attacker. You could argue David Brooks before he got injured, but other than that, I'm struggling a bit. I just thought it was a game where no one really grabbed it by the scruff of the neck and made anything happen. Really, the usual suspects, the 2 central defenders, who are usually excellent. I think Bednarek will be a bit disappointed in the header from the corner, and Howard Bellis looked a little bit shaky. So. So I don't think anyone really stood out, but yeah, Edozie and Walker-Peters, if anyone.
I was thinking Flynn Downs by not playing. One of those weeks where the player that doesn't play actually,
his reputation certainly enhanced on the back of that. That's for sure.
Stock goes up. Anyone else you want to add to the little poll which we're going to do online, Steve?
I mean, Bazunu was fine. I mean, first half. I mean, you can tell by like a goalkeeper's confidence is when their starting position is excellent. And the way he read that through ball that was played in behind Howard Bellis and got there just before the attacker did was absolute sign that he's kind of confident in his own game. He knows exactly where he needs to be and timed it superbly.
The attacker absolutely crapped himself as well, which was funny.
You would though, wouldn't you? All right, we'll get that poll on social media a little later. Now, we've got the perfect opportunity to bounce back on Friday evening, but of course it's not going to be easy. West Brom, the destination. So let's welcome back Chris Hall from the Albion Analysis podcast to help us preview this one. Hi Chris, how you doing?
Yeah, not too bad. Thanks for having me back, guys.
That's all right. Good win on Tuesday to follow up a decent point at the weekend. You must be relatively happy at the moment.
I'm more than relatively happy. I think we're above expectations. We're way above expectations. I think with everything going on behind the scenes at the club, we at the start of the season, we were worried how bad could this be. Especially if Cour went, rumours that Leeds were sniffing and all this sort of thing before they appointed Farke, and he didn't go. And to be honest, we've been excellent largely. Our away form's not been brilliant, but not taking anything for granted on Friday night, because obviously you guys are going to be an incredibly difficult game. But 5 consecutive wins at the Hawthorns, unbelievable home form since Cour came in, both last season and this, and we look very, very good on our own patch.
We were all watching with great interest, obviously the Ipswich game last weekend, which was it was the early kickoff, wasn't it? And it looked like an absolute belter of a game. What did you make of that one?
I mean, it was. Yeah, look at it this way: if you're a neutral, you loved it. Yeah, I mean, it was a little bit heart stopping to be a fan watching it. I'll be honest, but I thought we were really good. I've got some really good friends who do an Ipswich Town podcast, and I know they feel like they should have won the game. I thought we were well worth a point, to be honest with you, over the course of the 90 minutes. I thought there was some big moments in the game that sort of went against us mainly in terms of injuries. Losing Carl Bartley at half-time was absolutely massive. I thought he'd been an absolute man mountain in the first half, and to lose him at the break unsurprisingly, we concede a goal less than a minute into the second half from a long throw, where he's our best header of the ball. And then obviously to lose DK the way we did when he came on, fourth major injury he's had since he's been at the club, absolutely gutting for him. And it didn't, really didn't help, because late in the game, he would have 2-1 up, although the guy that came on for him made us 2-1. He would have been the guy that we'd have been hitting to hold the ball up, and we couldn't get out. If the game had gone on another minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, Ipswich definitely would have won it. I mean, it was absolute backs to the wall stuff at the end, but that wasn't representative of the whole game. I thought we were worth a point, but I'm glad the referee blew up, even though he took 90 seconds longer than he should have done. I'm glad he blew up when he did, because we weren't going to hang on much longer.
It always feels longer as well, doesn't it, when you're looking and watching him? So it was Cardiff, wasn't it? During the week, was that a well-managed game? Was that with an eye on Friday? Do you think was that a full strength team, or was there some changes there because your fixtures like ours, you play in Tuesday, Saturday, Friday? It's thick and fast right now.
I don't think, with the best will in the world, I don't think Cour ever prioritizes one game over another. I don't think there was. You're right. There was certain players left out, like Jed Wallace, for example. But I don't think. I think it was more to do with the fact that Jed Wallace is 30 in a month. You can only get so much football out of him. We've got the oldest starting 11 on average in the division. So we do need to rotate certain players sometimes, because when you've got a lot of players who are in or approaching their 30s, injuries can happen. So I think he rotated it to give us freshness and also to give us youthful enthusiasm. He brought Mikey Johnston in, who has come in on loan from Celtic, 23 years old, scores within 29 seconds, which was a pretty good way to introduce yourself on your home debut. It was a well-managed game, I think is the right way of putting it. We went 1-0 up, like I say, in the first minute, and then it wasn't a great game after that point, to be honest with you. Cardiff, with the due respect to them, and I've had this said to me by a couple of Cardiff fans, are very poor at offering a threat. But they threw Aaron Ramsey on after the hour, and they were starting to look threatening until we made our own substitutions, brought on that bit of experience: Wallace, Vyman, Adam Reach, Nathaniel Chalobah, and Chalobah, Wallace and Vyman combined to score the second goal, and that put the game to bed. And that's really where the difference has been for us since January. We didn't have those kind of options off the bench, but you look at our last 3 games. Birmingham City at home, Vyman comes off the bench and wins it for us. Ipswich away, Swift comes off the bench and puts us 2-1 up. And then Tuesday night, Wallace comes off the bench and sets up another substitute, Vyman. We've just got options now that we didn't have a few weeks ago.
Got to keep an eye on that bench then on Friday, Glenn. Back in November, it was 2-1, wasn't it? It wasn't a great game. I think Adam Armstrong with the winner with 10 minutes to go. It was not a classic, but it was. Were we like 8 games into the run or something? It was about riding out the result, really.
Yeah, from what I remember about it, a draw would have been a fair result, really, and I think it was heading that way, and we got a goal sort of like more or less out of nothing, just a bit of a lack of concentration in the defence, and Adam Armstrong put it in the net. So yeah, we managed to I think nick the win there without playing tremendously well. And at the time, we were kind of like, yeah, it's a sign of a good team. Win without playing particularly well. Little did we know that we were going to have another sort of like 13 games on the run before we lost again. So it was a good game to win. I mean, I know Chris is he's saying that they're exceeding expectations, from what I've seen this season, because obviously we've only just come down, so we don't have a sort of like big history in the Championship or recent history in the Championship. West Brom have been, they've been comfortably the 5th best team in the league this year, outside the 4 who have sort of like pulled away. So I see this as probably our most difficult game until we start playing the likes of Leicester and Ipswich and Leeds again. So yeah, looking forward to this one. But I think we had enough warning in the game at St Mary's, and we had a warning from Bristol City because they played well at St Mary's, and hopefully we heed that warning a little bit better than we did on on Tuesday night. I'll tell you something weird about the West Brom game at home. Ross Stewart played. How about that?
Oh wow, I'd forgotten about him.
Yeah,
that was his
He played
one
for about-
substitute appearance, wasn't it? Didn't
he played about 10. He had played about 10 minutes on the right wing, didn't he? He
Yeah.
looked very awkward, but
Wow.
we all thought he's our 30 goal a season, Golden Boot winner striker, and he's
the answer.
not. And Mason Holgate played well. That was the other bizarre thing about that game.
Man of the match, wasn't he, Holgate?
Man of the match, Mason
was.
Holgate. Before
I mean, just to clarify, Glenn, on what you're saying there about exceeding expectations, I don't mean in terms of like the quality of the squad, because we all the quality of the first 11 is definitely there, and you're right. We're the fifth best team in this division by merit at this moment in time. We're playing it incredibly well, and to be honest, if we'd had a better start, because our start was slightly disrupted by the fact that pretty much the whole squad was up for sale, so we didn't know who we could pick in the first few weeks of the season. I don't think we'd be quite up there with yourselves, Leeds, but I think we'd be worrying Ipswich a little bit more than we are if we'd had a better start. What I mean by exceeding expectations is we've got such a mess behind the scenes, and like I say, everyone was up for sale in the summer. I think a lot of Albion fans went into this season going, to be honest, if we don't sell half the squad and get embroiled in a relegation battle, we've done well. And not only have we managed to keep a lot of our players, but we've added in very intelligently for very little money. We knew we had no money to spend, and yet we've done loans and frees who've generally impacted the side. And Cour has just pulled together a very small group of players and got the absolute maximum out of them. But yet, by no means am I playing down the fact that we're punching above our weight in terms of the quality we have, because we thoroughly deserve to be where we are in the league table at this moment in time.
I remember last time you were on, we were talking about like the lack of money and the takeover that seems to be taking an absolute age to complete. So it does make it really difficult for you to kind of manage your expectations about where you might be. But Steve, they've certainly been, as Chris says, they've certainly been quite a consistent side this year. And when we spoke about both these games together at the weekend, you kind of had, Bristol City might be the easier of the two games, and then Friday was always going to be the big ask, and actually Friday now has probably got even bigger for us.
I mean, it's it's one of those where you want to see a response from the disappointment of Tuesday night, and I mean part of that's going to be down to I mean, the individuals are going to be motivated, aren't they? Because at the end of the day, they've been on a good run, and you, as professionals, that's what you do. But it's always interesting to see how certain players react to kind of setbacks. I mean, certainly when, like in recent years in the Premier League, when we've faced a setback, we've basically wilted. Now, I think the players that we've got at our disposal now do seem to be a little bit more sort of tougher mentally than those were. But yeah, you're always slightly worried. I mean, don't forget our only other defeats other than Tuesday night were 4 in a row. So, and that came off the back of one, which was a 5-0 hammering, and all of a sudden we looked completely lost for the best part of a month. So, yeah, I mean, ultimately, as long as we don't completely fold like we did in that period, then yeah, I mean, I'm reasonably confident that these players have got it in them to kind of put that game on Tuesday to one side and not worry themselves too much about it. Part of it obviously is going to depend on who's available, who's fit, who's maybe carrying a little niggle that perhaps they can't quite get through the game as we would have hoped. And I mean, of course, you're also then looking at the opposition. I mean, if West Brom turn up as they did at St Mary's, at the end of the day, I mean, apart from Huddersfield on Saturday, I think we've probably all agreed that West Brom were probably the best side we've played at home so far this season. And yeah, we kind of got a little bit. I mean, we took advantage of the one chance we created at the end. But other than that, it was a draw nailed on, really. And I think if West Brom play as well as they can, then we're going to have to play as well as we can. If they're slightly off it, then I mean, who knows? Kind of draw a result out of a lucky dip bag and see what happens. Because
and we will in a minute.
yeah, I mean it's one of those. If you've got both teams sort of going at it and playing to the best of their abilities, then that game's going to be great for the neutrals.
That's why they picked it for the telly.
Yeah, I mean, perhaps not so good for those of us who are going to be in the stands, but yeah, looking forward to it.
Anybody coming back on Friday, Chris? What's the team news? Who should we look out for?
No, Bartley. Well, yeah, we've got a couple back from the AFCON, but they've literally landed back in training today. So I wouldn't expect either Grady Diangana or Shemi Ajayi to start. Although we have got a little problem at centre half because Bartley's out for 2 to 3 weeks now. We've had it confirmed today. So
that's handy for us, I think.
Yeah, it is. Although in all fairness, Bartley's a real box defender, and he's an organizer, which helps. But we suffer more without him against the teams who put the ball in the box, and I don't think that's your MO. To be honest with you, you're more likely to play between the lines, and but that makes it interesting as to who he puts in, because obviously his replacement against Cardiff was Eric Peters, who is a very, very experienced, clever player, but he's not overly mobile. And whether we want him in there with Adam Armstrong, trying to split the centre halves and go between them, or whether we try to put Shemi Ajayi back in there because he's got a bit more pace, but then he's had one training session, so it is a little bit of a bit of a difficult choice at centre half. I think that's the only area where we've got a problem, as it were. I think the rest of our issues are nice problems. I think, to be honest, beyond that, I think it will probably be most likely one change from the other night. I think probably Mikey Johnston will come out, and our captain Jed Wallace will come back in, and Tom Fellows will switch across to the left, and Wallace will come back in on the right. The only other one that he might look at is whether he starts with John Swift or Andy Vyman, because Andy Vyman's been an absolute revelation, other than inexplicably punching the ball into the net against Ipswich, which I'd love to know hear from him why he did that, because I don't think anybody has a clue. But other than that, he's been absolutely tremendous. And John Swift just hasn't quite been the same player since he came back from injury. So it'll be an interesting one. I think Cour is very, very good at looking at the opposition and trying to match up against them. And I think he will look at you guys and know that Russell Martin is only going to play one way. He doesn't change for anybody. And I think it's a bit of a similar game to what we've had before at the Hawthorns. We've had Ipswich down there, we've beat them. We've had Leeds down there, we've beat them. And they all came to play, and they all came to have a go. And we said, okay, we're just going to put a lot of energy on the transition, which is why I think Vyman might come in for Swift, because he'll give us that extra energy in transition, and so will Wallace and Fellows. And I think we will just basically try to frustrate you a little bit, and then see if we can hit you on the break with the pace and the quality that we've got in turning the ball over, because that is what we're very, very good at. And to be honest, we're quite often better in home games when we can play a bit like the away side, which is probably why we've been so good against the teams at the top of the division. I mean, we should have got something out of Leicester as well, to be honest with you. We've looked really good against the teams at the top of the division. It's sometimes been the teams a bit further down the league that we've laboured to results against at the Hawthorns.
I'm going to get a score prediction from you in just a moment, Chris. Glenn, I just want to ask, I know Chris mentioned Adam Armstrong there. I mean, his away form, I think he's been involved in 8 goals in the last 9 league games away, 4 goals, maybe 4 assists, I think. Do you think he starts, though? Because I know that there was a suggestion that maybe actually Mara comes in to the team.
I think he starts. I think he starts every game. I kind of figured that our team is Adam Armstrong plus 10 others. At the moment, he's the captain. He will play. I think he's struggled a bit last few games. He's kept up his goal output and his assist output, but his all round play has not been great. I'm not a fan of him as the central striker. He's fine when he plays out wider, but with Che Adams being injured, so maybe Mara comes into the team and maybe Adam Armstrong moves to the right. Be interesting because we don't know how David Brooks is going to react to his altercation with the goalpost on Tuesday. So he might not be able to play this game. So Che Adams might be back. So, but I'm 100% sure that Adam Armstrong will be in the team somewhere.
And we've got our fingers crossed that Flynn Downs is back as well. All eyes will be on that team news at 7:00. Let's get some score predictions then. Steve, do you want to pluck a score out of thin air for this one?
I think we'll see a reaction, but ultimately, I think given West Brom's home form, their results, as Chris mentioned, against the other promotion candidates, I think we'll get out of there with a draw and be very happy with it. 1-1.
Okay, Glenn.
If Flynn Downs or Shay Charles plays, then I'm quite confident that we'll get something out of it. I would say a 1-1 draw. So let's assume that that's going to happen, and I'll go for 1-1 as well. However, if we go with the Smallbone, Rothwell, Stuart Armstrong midfield, we'll probably get beat 3-0.
We're in for
because
a long
I
night.
just think, just from what Chris has said there, the threat on the transition, that's what we cannot handle when those three guys are in midfield, because we just don't have anybody to stop it. Our fullbacks will be up the pitch, and if West Brom win the ball and attack us from deep with pace on the wings, then we will really struggle. So I just again, I'll find myself saying exactly what I said after the Huddersfield game, is that I just hope we get the balance right in midfield. Otherwise, we're going to have a real struggle.
And Chris, score prediction from you, please. We won't share it with anybody else.
I have to say, I was feeling confident until Glenn rattled through the names that you've got in your squad there. There's so many players you don't even clock that you've got, and I have to say, I'm rather hopeful that Flynadine Zidowns isn't available, because I think he's an absolute player. Do you know what? I'm not confident by any stretch of the imagination, but just purely on the basis of 5 straight wins at home and the fact that we've turned over Leeds and Ipswich at the Hawthorns, I'm going to go for 2-1 to the Baggies. But I absolutely wouldn't be shocked if it was the other way. One thing I will say, Glenn, it ain't going to be 3-0. Because we don't blow anyone away. It'll be tight, whatever it is. I think it will be 1 goal either way, or a draw, but I don't see anybody winning this at a canter.
Okay.
I got a question for you, Chris. You've won 5 games at home. Would you have swapped it all to beat Wolves in the FA Cup?
No. Do you know what? I would have thoroughly enjoyed that and everything like that. But
it's carnage, that.
Yeah, and it was crazy, and and I think we'd have loved the day and everything, but the reality is, it was just, and sorry, this is just the real sober hat on me, that especially with all the financial problems we've had around the club, a shot at promotion this season is absolutely everything to this football club. And yes, I would have enjoyed and rubbed that win in Wolves' his faces, just as they've rubbed the fact that they beat us in ours. And it would have been thoroughly joyous on the day. But if it had come at the cost of promotion, I can't make that swap. It's just, one is bigger than the other, as much as Wolves think that they're bigger than they are.
A good answer. If we have to chat to you again, Chris, then I think that means that we're both in the playoffs. So we'll worry about that bridge when we get there. But for the meantime, enjoy the weekend, and as insightful as ever, thanks for coming on. Thanks for your time tonight.
My pleasure,
cheers.
guys. Thanks for having me.
If you're watching live, don't forget you can put your comments, put your predictions in the comments, because we do like seeing those. I mentioned at the start the news that we weren't expecting today, the tweet from David Ornstein at lunchtime. Manchester United working on a deal to appoint Jason Wilcox to a senior post in the new Manchester United setup. I haven't checked Twitter for the last hour, but at the time it said Manchester United yet to approach Southampton for the highly rated director of football, but the 52-year-old is aware of interest. Job would report into a sporting director. Glenn, I'm just going to get your thoughts on this first. It feels to me like we've been here before, but that wasn't really the news we wanted to read this afternoon. It's a bit,
No, and it always annoys me, because it's obviously Manchester United leaking stuff to to the Athletic, who let's remember, the Athletic don't care about Saints at all. So they haven't even got a reporter for us at the moment. So don't read the Athletic. Yeah, but David Ornstein is obviously a reputable source, and it's somewhat annoying just when we begin to get things going in the right direction. It would certainly be a bit of a problem if that happened. But if it does happen, then Sport Republic have to deal with it. I feel like we haven't mentioned Sport Republic for quite a while, and that's because we haven't had to, because they've
which is a
sort
very
of
good
kept
thing.
Yeah.
Absolutely, because they've kept in the background and let Jason Wilcox and Russell Martin get on with it. So one would hope that, should it come to it, and Wilcox does go, after he'd have quite a sizable notice period. We were discussing this before the program, I think. So it wouldn't be until the end of this season that he did go. But you would hope that Sport Republic would get someone else in and not appoint someone from within. And we all know who I'm talking about. So
yeah,
the big brain himself.
The big brain himself. So it's at the end of the day, it's backroom staff. It's very important backroom staff. Obviously, let's not make it out to be less than what it is. And it would be a blow because he's only been here 6 months.
Yeah.
And I think everyone was happy with the appointment, and everyone's been happy with the way it's gone. And he's obviously got his finger on the pulse of young players from his academy days at Manchester City. So let's hope it is it is smoke without fire. But you kind of fear the worst when it's Manchester United. It's like one of your players getting linked to them. You know that if it's concrete, the chances are it's going to happen.
He's not going to say no, is he, Steve? If they do make the offer, he's not going to turn that down. I mean, we assume that family and stuff in and around Manchester, and a chance to go back, and obviously double, maybe 3 times the money, and working for a huge club. It's an offer that you can't turn down, really.
Yeah, I would imagine so. I kind of always liken these sort of backroom jobs to they're almost kind of normal jobs in many regards. So, but essentially not footballers who have theoretically other considerations. But they're these sort of director roles and scouting and recruitment and all this sort of stuff. They're kind of almost like their football's kind of answer to the normal jobs that you and I have. In the ultimately, if you're within the industry and you're offered 3 times your salary to go and work for a bigger organization where you get more responsibility, I mean, yeah, of course. I mean, of course you're going to take that. But it'll be interesting to see what their actual specifics are in terms of the plan for him, because obviously he's basically got full control here. And it's possible that in 5 months' time, he's got full control in that position at a Premier League football club. So he won't have that at Manchester United, obviously, because massive club, you're talking silly money, and also they're seemingly going to be bringing Dan Ashcroft in from Newcastle to kind of head up the sort of off-field sort of operations. And so he's kind of going to be the guy in charge, and he's the one that's got the fantastic sort of long-term track record of excellent recruitment and scouting and managing, sort of from a financial perspective, all of the sort of various things that the elite clubs don't need to worry about in terms of signing players for not much and polishing them up and selling them on for massive profit to stay within FFP. Now, Man United don't really have that many concerns, I don't think, on that front. So it'll be interesting to see what the remit is for what they would want Wilcox to do, because it will be very different from the job that he's done with us and the job that he did previously at Man City, which is obviously very academy focused. So yeah, I mean, I guess wait and see what happens on that. But I mean, you'd like to think that as soon as we've got wind of it, we're already sounding out potential replacements who can start quickly.
Because this is not our first rodeo, is it? You know, we've been there before with Joe Shields. I was trying to think like Matt Crocker, Paul Mitchell back in the day as well. We've always had these people behind the scenes that have been really good directors of football or heads of recruitment, and they've left, of course, as they would for better jobs. And we've always seemingly been able to replace them with somebody as good, sometimes better.
Mostly.
Yeah.
I mean, look at the previous 4 years didn't go quite so well on the recruitment front, but I think, certainly there is more understanding now in the game in this country about what these sort of roles entail, and as a result, it's clubs are a lot better at finding people who have got the right skill sets, as opposed to just picking an ex-player who maybe failed as a manager and but still wants a job in the game, and their agent just gets in the ear of a club and says, "Yeah, why not give him a job as director of football? See how that goes." And then it all goes horribly wrong. I mean, do you remember Rio Ferdinand touting himself as the Man United director of football?
No, I don't remember
three or 4 years ago. It was like, what have you got to offer this role? Absolutely nothing.
Wow.
But clubs do. The vast majority of clubs have learned, and so as a result, there are a lot of specialists in the game who we would be able to attract. There'll be other guys doing similar jobs at championship clubs. You could probably also look at maybe some at the bottom end of the Premier League, as well as abroad as well. So it's not quite the sort of devastating step into the unknown when Paul Mitchell left, all those years ago, that we were suddenly, who's actually going to manage our fancy black box. It's a lot more refined now, and I think as long as Rasmus doesn't decide he wants to do it himself, then...
Well, that was the only thing that worried me ever so slightly when I saw the news, was the thought of finally, clinching promotion at the first attempt, getting that second spot, and then Rasmus Ankersen overseeing the transfer window before we start another season in the Premier League. It's like, oh, God. So we'll see. But I kind of get the impression that this might move quite quickly, because if Manchester United get their work done, then I'm sure we may even know by the time you're listening to this. So we shall see. That's it for this midweek episode. Don't forget, you can follow Total Saints Podcast on all the social media platforms. It's at Total Saints Pod. We do like to hear from you throughout the week, so you can drop us a DM on any of the socials, or you can email us via the website. We post loads of stuff on TikTok as well, so give us a little follow on there and check some of that out. And do have a look at the new merch store if you get a few minutes. shop.totalsaints.co.uk is the website address. Are you wearing yours tonight, Glenn? Is that the t-shirt I can...
No, it's a Sleeping Mods t-shirt. It's nothing to do with it.
But it looks good anyway. You'll also find us on Patreon. That's where you can support the podcast with the monthly contributions. It's patreon.com/Total Saints Podcast. There are 4 tiers on there, ranging from £5 to £20 per month. Each of the tiers comes with those different perks, including the shouts for the patrons in our Francis Benali and our Mick Shannon tiers. So thank you to Dave Melton, Mark Atkins, Andy Hollis, Anthony Thompson, Saints in Exile, Gavin Ford, James Harron, Nicky Nicholson, Southampton NY, Drew Dyer, James Kibbe, and Mike E, who are in the Francis Benali tier. And also thanks to Colt Baker, Dave Ernsberger, Ed Busy, Nick Higston, Phil Cook, Nick Reed, Paul Stewart, Phil Horstrup, Matt Hall, and Mark Littlewood, who are in our Mick Shannon tier. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Glenn. Thank you for watching and listening, and we will see you again on Sunday evening at the usual